At the beginning of World War II, Palestinian Jews strongly opposed Britain's white paper policy, yet all anti-British activities effectively ceased. Jewish young men voluntarily enlisted in the British Army, heading to the front lines of the anti-Axis war. By the end of 1939, more than 130,000 had registered for military service, accounting for roughly two-thirds of adult Jewish men in Palestine. From the outset, the Jewish Agency proposed the formation of a separate Jewish military unit. But the British authorities insisted on mixed units composed of both Jews and Arabs. It was only in 1944, when the Allies needed more manpower for their counteroffensive, that Britain agreed to the creation of a Jewish brigade under the British Army. Initially, it comprised just over 5,000 men, but ultimately 35,000 Palestinian Jews served in the British forces. The Haganah, tasked with defending the Jewish community in Palestine, maintained its most elite and independent strike force, the Palmach, formed in 1941 from a predecessor nighttime commando unit. The Palmach had two primary objectives: to protect Jewish settlements from Arab attacks and to safeguard Palestine from potential German invasion. Later, it also carried out clandestine operations to smuggle European Jewish refugees into Palestine. Initially, the Palmach had 6 companies, later expanding to 9. Composed of young men and women, it operated without ranks, uniforms, or salaries. Despite its informal structure, it was a highly motivated, idealistic, and effective fighting force. Its guiding principle was that the smallest combat unit was an armed individual, and leaders were to lead from the front rather than command from behind, a principle later adopted by the Israel Defense Forces. As the war progressed and circumstances evolved, more radical factions within the Jewish Yishuv advocating stronger action against Britain became active. By 1942, violent actions targeting British authorities resumed. In 1939, a more extreme faction broke away from the Irgun, led by Avraham Stern. Opposing the Haganah's and Irgun's restrained policies, Stern's group, the Lehi, also called the Stern Gang, carried out independent violent operations against the British, even proposing collaboration with Germany in exchange for relocating European Jews to Palestine. In 1942, Menachem Begin became the leader of the revisionist Zionists and commander of the Irgun, advocating a tougher stance against Britain. By late 1943, he openly broke with the Jewish Agency and Haganah, pursuing independent military confrontation. Initially numbering only 500 to 600, the Irgun focused on sabotage of British military, police, and administrative facilities, as well as anti-British propaganda. In the later war years, disillusionment with the Jewish Agency's moderate policies drove more Jewish youth to join the Irgun. Its actions escalated to direct attacks on British personnel. In January 1944, the Irgun officially resumed armed struggle against Britain, carrying out sabotage, raids on police stations, assassinations, and thefts of weapons from British camps, sometimes disguised as Arabs or British soldiers. The British authorities were frustrated by both the Lehi and Irgun's underground activities, which were conducted independently and occasionally conflicted with Haganah operations. However, the British often accused the Jewish Agency of either failing to stop or even secretly supporting these acts. This tense, cautious relationship between the Jewish Agency and Britain persisted until the end of the war. The Holocaust in Europe forced many Jews to flee, but most countries refused to accept them, resulting in a surge of refugees heading to the Jewish homeland in Palestine. The British White Paper limited Jewish immigration to only 10,000 per year, with an additional 25,000 special permits, leaving many refugees blocked from entry. In response, Jewish organizations, including the Haganah, Irgun, and Jewish labor unions, organized clandestine immigration, renting dozens of ships to smuggle refugees. Interceptions by the Royal Navy made these missions extremely dangerous, sometimes resulting in disasters. In November 1940, Two old refugee ships near Haifa carrying about 2,000 passengers were intercepted. The British attempted to transfer them to Mauritius aboard the Patria. To prevent the deportation, the Haganah planted a bomb intended to disable the ship's engines. However, the explosion was miscalculated, causing the ship to sink rapidly and killing over 200 Jewish refugees. At the end of 1941, another ship, the Struma, from the Black Sea sank at sea due to lack of visas, with only one survivor. These tragedies fueled Jewish resentment toward the British Mandate authorities. In November 1944, two Lehi members assassinated Lord Moyne, Britain's Middle East minister, in Cairo. He had previously opposed Zionist immigration and blocked the Patria refugees. Although the assassination was carried out by Lehi, it was widely attributed to the Irgun. In retaliation, the Haganah began operations against Irgun members, assisting the British in dismantling their command structure. This rivalry continued until the war's end. After World War II, Britain sought to maintain its influence in the Middle East and preserve relations with Arab states, continuing the 1939 White Paper policy. In response, Jewish leaders escalated illegal immigration operations and strengthened diplomatic efforts to secure American support for a Jewish state. In August 1945, Ben-Gurion visited the United States, pressing Britain to implement the Biltmore program and issue 100,000 immigration certificates for European Jews. He warned that continued enforcement of the White Paper would lead to bloody and sustained acts of terror against the British Mandate. By October 1945, the Haganah, Irgun, and Lehi formed the Hebrew resistance movement, conducting warning strikes against British authorities. The Palmach sank 3 Royal Navy coastal patrol boats and sabotaged 150 railway points, while the Irgun attacked the Lydda train station and military facilities. And Lehi attempted to destroy the Haifa oil refinery. The Jewish agency feigned inability to control these actions, frustrating British demands. By early 1946, violence escalated further, with frequent bloodshed and increasing confrontation with the British. In June 1946, over 17,000 British troops conducted mass arrests, seizing weapons and detaining thousands, including senior Jewish agency leaders. Ben-Gurion was abroad at the time and escaped arrest. On July 22, 1946, the Irgun carried out a major bombing at the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, targeting British administrative and military offices. Irgun operatives disguised as Arabs smuggled 500 pounds of explosives into the hotel. The Irgun claimed to have issued telephone warnings to evacuate the building, but for disputed reasons, the hotel was not evacuated. The blast destroyed the hotel's east wing, killing 91 people and injuring 45, shocking the world and causing public outrage. The British retaliated with massive searches, curfews, and patrols, arresting numerous suspects. Throughout 1946, violent clashes spread across Palestine, with Irgun actions becoming increasingly bold and independent, reaching peaks in assassinations, kidnappings, and sabotage. British reprisals often provoked stronger responses. That year alone, 73 British military and civilian personnel were killed, with 93 injured, and hundreds of Jewish casualties. In December 1946, the 22nd Zionist Congress convened in Basel, Switzerland, the first since World War II and 7 years after the previous one. By this time, global Zionist membership had reached 2 million, with the largest community in the United States. The Congress condemned terrorism but reaffirmed the determination to establish a Jewish state. Chaim Weizmann, the pro-British leader, resigned, leaving Ben-Gurion as the de facto head of the Zionist movement. Thus ended Weizmann's 35-year era and began Ben-Gurion's pragmatic, action-oriented leadership. By early 1947, Palestine was in chaos, resembling an anarchic state. Despite harsh British measures, including executions, Irgun and Lehi retaliated by kidnapping British hostages. In May, the Irgun staged a daring prison break at Acre, freeing over 200 prisoners, including 30 Irgun and Lehi members. Britain, weakened post-war by economic crisis and domestic pressures, found the Palestinian unrest increasingly unsustainable. Maintaining order cost £30 million annually, and public fatigue with endless violence made the mandate increasingly untenable. Despite numerous difficulties, Britain still sought a solution acceptable to both Arabs and Jews in order to maintain stability in Palestine and preserve its rule. In September 1946, Britain invited representatives from both sides to a roundtable conference in London as a final effort. Britain proposed a plan to implement autonomy over 5 years, followed by independence, while Britain would continue administration during the transitional period. However, this proposal was rejected by both parties, and the London Roundtable Conference ended in failure. At the time, the entire region of Palestine was in chaos, and British governance was extremely difficult. Meanwhile, the United States restricted Britain's diplomatic options, making negotiation impossible. In this impasse, the British cabinet concluded that the conflict between Arabs and Jews was irreconcilable. To prevent British lives and resources from being wasted in favor of one side, Britain decided to abandon Palestine. 25 years earlier, the League of Nations had granted Britain the mandate to govern Palestine. By 1946, the League had ceased to exist, but the newly established United Nations was recognized as its legal successor. Therefore, Britain could only hand over the matter to the UN. On February 18, 1947, British Foreign Secretary Ernest Bevin declared in the House of Commons that the British government had no right to hand Palestine directly to the Arabs or Jews. The only feasible course was to submit the issue to the United Nations. On April 2, 1947, Britain's UN representative formally wrote to UN Secretary-General WWII, requesting a special session to discuss the Palestine issue. Britain stated it would not propose any solutions, thereby transferring the burden of Palestine to the UN while remaining merely a temporary caretaker. From April 28 to May 15, 1947, the UN held a special session in New York to address the Palestine issue, approving a proposal to grant Jewish representatives the right to speak. At that time, several Arab countries were UN members, while the Jews had no official representation. The Jewish Agency swiftly organized a delegation led by David Ben-Gurion to attend. During the meeting, two main proposals emerged. One advocated establishing an Arab-Jewish federal state with equal rights for both communities. The other suggested partitioning Palestine into separate Arab and Jewish states. Ultimately, the session passed a resolution establishing the UN Special Committee on Palestine, UNSCOP, composed of 11 countries: Australia, Canada, Czechoslovakia, Venezuela, India, Iran, the Netherlands, Peru, Sweden, Uruguay, and Yugoslavia, to investigate and make recommendations. Both Arab and Jewish sides were allowed to appoint 2 liaison officers to cooperate with the committee. Arab representatives emphasized that any solution violating Arab sovereignty over Palestine would be unacceptable and warned that enforcing such a solution could trigger war. British representatives also stated that they would not assist in implementing any plan not accepted by both parties. From May to August, the Special Committee held meetings in New York, Jerusalem, and Beirut, visiting Palestine, Syria, and Jordan, listening to local opinions, and conducting hearings. The reactions of Palestinians to the UN intervention were sharply divided. The Arab Higher Committee, led by Amin al-Husseini, chose a policy of non-cooperation, forbidding Arabs to work with the committee, refusing to appoint liaison officers, and boycotting meetings. Even though some Arabs believed non-cooperation was unwise, none dared to openly defy al-Husseini. In contrast, the Jewish Agency welcomed the committee and actively cooperated. arranging for Economic Director David Horowitz and New York Representative Advisor Abba Eban to serve as liaisons. The committee inspected Jewish and Arab factories, farms, villages, and met with local leaders and citizens, striving for objectivity. The committee found that the Jewish community fully cooperated, guiding visits to Haifa factories, orchards in Mount Carmel, the Tel Aviv port, research institutes in Safed, and the Jordan River hydroelectric plant in the Negev. These achievements impressed committee members, who increasingly believed that forcibly removing the Jewish population was impractical. Jews had become an inseparable part of Palestine. During its fieldwork, the committee also witnessed the SS Exodus 1947 refugee ship incident. In July 1947, a ship carrying 4,515 Holocaust survivors from German camps departed Marseille, France, and reached the coast of Palestine. On July 18th, approximately 20 nautical miles from Haifa, the ship was intercepted by the British Navy. Armed conflict ensued. The British used rifles and tear gas, while refugees defended themselves with brooms and tin cans, resulting in 3 crew deaths. The British subsequently transferred the refugees to prison ships and planned to deport them back to Hamburg, Germany. UN investigators arriving in Haifa witnessed women, children, and elderly crammed into hot, confined spaces on the ship's deck, sparking outrage and sympathy among the committee. They concluded that British treatment was inhumane and could not endure. Upon returning to Geneva, the committee drafted its report while monitoring the fate of the Exodus refugees. Learning that the refugees had indeed been forcibly returned to Germany strengthened the resolve of previously undecided committee members. British mandatory rule over Palestine was unjust and untenable, and the Jews should urgently have their own state.